Welcome to the MTech Access Words of Wisdom webinar, where each month we bring you the very latest insight from senior health and social care leaders. We'll be getting to grips with the evolving NHS, exploring the challenges our guests face, how they may respond to them, and what their priorities look like in the short, medium, and possibly even long term. This is all about connecting you with the people leading the NHS. It's not just giving you our commentary from the outside. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Laura Angus, who is the Interim Lead Pharmacist for the Humber, Coast and Vale Integrated Care System. As one of the first in the country to be appointed to a role like this, Laura is right at the leading edge of the integrating care agenda. And today we'll be starting to get to grips with how the commissioning and delivery of medicines might work in the future NHS. I'll try to address as many of the questions submitted in advance as I can do. If there are any more questions that you do have, send them to us after the event and we'll see if we can get back to you. Otherwise, sit back and enjoy, and hopefully we'll illuminate a bit more around the future of medicines. So Laura, thank you, and yeah, welcome. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. It's our pleasure, all ours. So very interesting role that you've just taken on. Could you just give us a bit of an overview of what the role is, introduce yourself, and just a bit of recent context about how you've got here, I suppose?
Yeah, that's fine. So hi everybody. So Tom's already said I'm Laura. I'm officially Head of Medicines Optimisation at NHS Vale of York CCG. And I very recently, November time, was appointed as the interim lead for Humber, Coast and Vale ICS for pharmacy and medicines optimisation. Just to do some caveats, I'll either not be able to answer a question because I genuinely don't know the answer, which I'll say, or I will not be able to answer because of confidentiality reasons and things haven't been published, you know, wider at this point. For the past 2 weeks, well, longer than that, but the past 2 weeks have been incredibly intense. It's all been about COVID vaccination. So I'm kind of caught on the hoof. I'm very happy to do this. Apologies that I had to cancel on Friday, and I really appreciate the chance to do this today. So yeah, so how did I get here? We've had a Humber, Coast and Vale Pharmacy Leadership Group for about 2 to 3 years. So that's about all the leads for the system coming together. So the acute chiefs, the heads of medicines optimisation, the mental health care trust leads, and community pharmacy, local pharmaceutical committee leads, and others. And we all come together, and we have done for 2 to 3 years. And we say, what can we do, and what can we do across the system? What can we do once? So that has been happening on a kind of informal basis, and we've done quite a lot of stuff together, which I can go to in a minute. And then when the IPMO guidance came out on the 17th of September, so that's Integrating Pharmacy and Medicines Optimisation, that came out from Keith Ridge, it kind of made it more formal because they'd had 7 IPMO pilots across the country. And they'd gone very well, and then it became a thing that IPMO had to happen in each ICS. So that guidance came out, and we were like, right, we need to progress this. And originally it had some quite tight deadlines in it. So at first it was we had to submit things by November, but because of COVID, all of that has been pushed back. So we got together in I'm going to say October, it's all a bit of a blur now, and the group decided internally that we needed a named lead because the language we used is that we're a ship without a rudder, so we needed a name lead, and that name lead would be a point of contact for that pharmacy leadership group to link in with the other leads in the Humber, Coast and Vale for other things. Link in with the regional chief pharmacist for Yorkshire and Humber, and just kind of hold the ring on everything, and chair the meetings that we have. Be very clear that our leadership model is a dispersed leadership model. So you know, everyone in that group, that leadership group, has a role and a part to play. So although I'm the named lead, I don't hold everything. I just try and pull it all together with the help of, we've got PMO support, and just kind of hold it all together and push things on. So we wanted a lead. We said we wanted a lead. So then we decided to go out for expressions of interest about who wanted to be the lead. And that's how I became the lead. So it's kind of a informal, you know, put my hand up and off you go. And, you know, that journey started. So does that help? Does that answer that?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, you're just starting to find out what you've got yourself in for, I guess. You mentioned the 7 pilots that have taken place. Could you just give us a very brief overview of the sorts of things that they looked at, and also what your focuses as a leadership group have been over the recent months or the last couple of years?
So the IPMO pilots looked at different things. I'm not going to say I know in detail what they all looked at, but you know, I know one of them looked at workforce in particular, so sharing workforce across sites. So if they had a vacancy, you know, instead of just like the CCG recruiting, for example, they would recruit across the system, so or at a subsystem level maybe. So share it across a hospital and a CCG, or a CCG and a PCN. So that's been some sharing that they've done. Medicines optimization, for example. So we did a self-care campaign, and you know, instead of just doing that for the Vale of York, that was shared from North Yorkshire to Vale of York, and then right up to the rest of the Humber CCGs. So you know, all the campaign, the marketing material was all the same, and we thought that would have more impact if you know, everywhere you went, you saw the same poster about self-care. Medicines waste as well, so North Yorkshire and York did some stuff about medicines waste, so only order what you need, and getting the patients to take ownership for ordering their medicines, as opposed to the pharmacies doing that on their behalf. And again, that was shared across Humber, Coast and Vale. We've discussed at length things like the DOACs, so guidance around DOACs as a whole group, and sharing learning. And Avastin, for example, that's, you know, nothing actually has happened because of the Avastin situation, but we've discussed it at length as a group, all of us come together. And then in recent weeks, it has all been about COVID vaccination, and this group has been invaluable to me, and I'm a bit gushy and a bit you know, over enthusiastic, but they have been amazing. I could not have survived the last 2 weeks without that leadership group and the people in that leadership group, and they know who they are, helping, advising, sharing knowledge, sharing best practice right across Humber, Coast and Vale, and it's just been fantastic. And we wouldn't have had that if we didn't have the leadership group in place. I wouldn't have known those people to phone them up and ask them, you know, whatever at 8 o'clock at night. So, so there's quite a long list. And sorry if I'm, you know, if you want to jump in, but I guess I think people originally thought, you know, people who, I guess, non-pharmacy people thought, you know, oh great, this is going to be another way to do QIP and you know, QIP at bigger scale. And I'm just really clear that yes, QIP will be a part of it. It will be something that we look as a system, and you know, we never want to waste any NHS resources, and we want to make sure we make best use of NHS resources. But there is so much more that these groups can do. So we will, when we get past this COVID period, you know, medicine safety will be a huge element that we do. Interface issues, so you know, when a patient goes from hospital care to primary care, how do we make that better? You know, the DOAC thing, that's going to always be on the agenda, those big commissioning queries, I guess, and formulary and commissioning. So there's lots to do, and it's really exciting.
Yeah, fantastic. And it's really coming through that it's that holistic piece around medicines. It's not just focusing on sort of the more transactional elements of this versus that, or those formally based decisions. It's really the appropriate use of medicines, the value of medicines, and the patient piece as well, around how to get them doing the self-care piece as well. So it sounds like a fascinating role. You mentioned a bit there about the support from the leadership group. Could you just give us a bit of a flavour of what the ICS footprint looks like? the organisations within it, and maybe what the relationships between the different pharmacy leaders or the different pharmacy contingents have been historically.
Okay, so I'm going to get into trouble here because I'm going to forget people, and then yeah, I'll be in trouble. So for Humber, Coast and Vale, I can't list all the partners, the stakeholders that are part of Humber, Coast and Vale. I will forget them all. But if I go through from a pharmacy point of view, so we have 6 CCGs in Humber, Coast and Vale. Do you want me to list them, or is that helpful?
You don't need to list them. If you just give us a bit of an overview, and then people can go away and do that.
6 CCGs, and then we've got the acute hospitals. So off the top of my head, we've got 4 acute hospitals. We've got the mental health trusts. For example, CHUV, they cover a huge, vast area. So they cover off, they will have to attend about 3 ICS meetings, I think, because of the geography that they sit in. And then we've got social enterprise companies that are part of that. And as I said before, community pharmacy, LPC, representation. And then I've got a gap that I'm fully aware of and will address. I've got a bit of a gap for a PCN link, or GP practice-based pharmacy. So as CCG pharmacists, we do closely link in with the PCNs, but I would like PCN attendance, but that's quite hard because I believe off the top of my head we've got something like 96 PCNs across Humber, Coast and Vale. So we need, don't quote me on that figure, it's a lot. So we need to find a way for that representation. So it's normally either the head of medicines optimization that attends from the CCGs, and it's normally the chief pharmacists that attend, and the LPC chief executives. So that's the kind of group that you're looking at. So there's a fair few of us, and we dip in and out depending on what we're talking about, because we don't all need to attend, like the COVID vaccination stuff. It's as appropriate, you come and you join the meeting as needed.
Yeah, and that is obviously a huge range of stakeholders and all the different areas of prescribing, I suppose, that you could imagine. Historically, what have those, again, share as much as you want to, but how close have relationships been amongst those different groups? How much conversation has there been around prescribing and medicines?
So that's fine, I'm happy to share. So between like what I'd call the subsystem levels, the local systems, there's always been that sharing. So, you know, I've got fantastic relationships with the chief pharmacist, deputy chief pharmacist at York Hospital, for example, because that's my local system for Vale of York. We've always had those fantastic relationships. Same for North Yorkshire with theirs, and then the Humber with theirs. I guess it's that massive footprint of Humber, Coast and Vale. Whereas I wouldn't have had those relationships with, you know, the chief pharmacist at Hull, who has been an absolute star. I wouldn't have known him. I knew his name, but I wouldn't have known him to phone him up. And same for the other chief pharmacists. I think that the CCGs have always had close relationships because we share and then the chief pharmacists will have close relationships because they have shared traditionally as chiefs. They have a meeting, and CCGs, we have a meeting. So those, you know, it's just linking all those dots together.
Yeah, absolutely. And you talked there about well, I'm going to use the word place because it's the new lexicon, kind of the Vale of York, North Yorkshire, Humber, which in the new world would probably be viewed as place, and you having those relationships at that level.
I don't think that is place personally. Don't quote me on being an expert on the language of place, but I'm a stickler for us getting the right description. I think place is smaller. So for example, City of York, I think is what they're describing as place, but again, don't quote me, I'm not an expert. I think North Yorkshire and York would be described as a subsystem. Again, don't quote me on that, but that's the way that we're kind of getting it. And what I've made really key, and I'm guilty of it myself, is that when we're talking about something, just name the geography so we know we're on the same page. Because if someone's talking about place, then you think it's North Yorkshire and York, and I think it's, you know, a smaller City of York, it gets very confusing. So that's just, I think subsystem. So sorry, what's your question?
No, that's very useful context to get, and I think for our audience, that's going to give them another variation on how they might view the world. But I suppose the thrust of the question was, you've historically seen things in those geographies, those subsystem, those place levels. How will the ICS level sort of do things differently? What would you do at an ICS level that maybe you wouldn't have done previously, and vice versa?
Okay. So yeah, I think I've worked in North Yorkshire and York area since 2007. So that is what I know, and I know how that works very, very well. I think that the Humber bit is a lesser known, and not unknown, but a lesser known. So they have different priorities in terms of their populations and different starting levels. So I guess we need to establish, you know, what is a situation for all of us that we all would like to address, and then it would make sense, and we have started to do that, hence the, you know, the manage repeat situation. That was something that we all wanted to do and needed to do, and that's the bit that's to come. So it's a case of what have we done to date that we want to carry on doing as Humber Coast and Vale level. What else on the list do we think we should do at Humber Coast and Vale level, or what do we think actually this would sit better on a subsystem level or even smaller level? So if I give you the example of commissioning decisions, which I think your audience will be quite keen to know about.
Absolutely.
That, you know, at the moment that is felt that would be better at subsystem level, so as a smaller geography than Humber Coast and Vale, just to start off with, because we just felt it was too vast at this time to do Humber Coast and Vale level. If we can establish it well at subsystem level, so I think in my head, and this is not established and this is not official, you know, if we can establish it at North Yorkshire and York level, and they can establish it at Humber level, then in time we could move to Humber Coast and Vale level if that was appropriate and that was, you know, the way it worked. But so it's different. It'll be decision by decision on how that is, you know, works. But I can see that we're going to do a lot of things Humber Coast and Vale level because that is the way the money's going to flow. So I'll give you an example of you know, recent monies that have come to Humber Coast and Vale. So the Community Pharmacy Consultation Service, where the GP practice can refer to a community pharmacy for a patient that's got a minor ailment. That's a national service. Money to get that going is flowing to Humber Coast and Vale for us to use at Humber Coast and Vale level, and so it's going to, you know, make sense that we do it across. So I think the direction of travel that I'm understanding is the money will flow that way, but it doesn't necessarily mean it has to be spent at Humber Coast and Vale level. It might be that even just one CCG at this point says, actually, we're ready to use that, we can do that, and they go ahead on behalf of the system and then share that learning and cascade that on throughout the system. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I guess, you know, we're having this conversation, you know, still ahead of the ahead of April, when a lot of this stuff will start to be formalised, and we appreciate there's a lot that you're still waiting to hear in your role as well. So that sort of triaging, I suppose, of different things and figuring out what level they might sit at will be fascinating to sort of understand more about in time. Do you see ICSs as having the freedom or the ability to provide new routes to access for medicines?
Don't know, and that's a don't know because I don't know. Not because I can't comment because of confidentiality. I honestly don't know. We're not quite clear. I still feel, and this is just my speculation, that it will be a mainly NHS England kind of model and then be cascaded out. Obviously, we've always got our local basis for commissioning decisions as we do now. So if it's not a nice approved drug, then we decide locally if we would like to use it for the population. And that's based on what else is available, you know, what else is out there, what are the pathways that would involve. And that's a really key part about to get over about interface issues, because it's not just the cost of the drug that we consider, it's the you know, the whole pathway, who's prescribing it, where does that cost sit, is it right that it's prescribed there, and then how is it, if it's for example a red drug or an amber drug, you know, is it appropriate then to go to primary care for them to pick up. I've lost my thread, and I had to ask the question again because I had a point to make.
It was about the new routes to access for medicines.
The new routes to access, and so the other thing is just to say that the plan is that we will align very closely with the RMOCs, so the Regional Medicines Optimisation Committees. So they've been very quiet recently, and they've been very quiet recently because of COVID. Everyone's been very quiet. If they're quiet, it's because they're doing COVID stuff. So, you know, the same people who sit on RMOC are very, very heavily involved with COVID. So they're quiet at the moment, but our understanding is we will link closely with the RMOCs. And again, those routes of for medicines to come in, we've got, you know, nice TAs, we've got local decisions, and we've got the RMOCs. So I think I feel it'll be similar to the way it is now, just on a bigger footprint.
Yeah, okay. And where do you see APCs, area prescribing committees, fitting into that? Would you have one for the ICS?
No. So that's what I've just described about the what I said when I was talking about medicines commissioning decisions, about one for North Yorkshire and York.
Right.
Is, you know, and it is not official. That's not been that hasn't happened yet, but a kind of vision that we'd go for North Yorkshire and York and Humber, and then see how that goes. So subsystem levels.
Yeah, okay. And in terms of the work with the RMOCs, do you see that you'd be working sort of collaboratively with other ICSs, so looking at the North East or other parts of Yorkshire?
Yeah, we already do. So so the regional chief pharmacist, she holds you know, Humber Coast, not Humber Coast, but North East and York Humber footprint. So there's 4 ICSs within that, so we're all linked up through that. And again, gushy, COVID has brought us all together. We've been having webinars with the regional chief pharmacist, so we've all got to know each other a bit better, you know, although be it virtually. And when all the guidance came out regarding IPMO on the 17th of September, you know, I reached out to North East and Cumbria as they were a pilot site, and I will reach out to the other West Yorkshire. So, well, I have some West Yorkshire, got good contacts there. So I'm more like, where are you up to? Where are you up to? What have you done? What have you done? And then there's a South Yorkshire and Basset Law that started to make connections with, not as fast as I'd like because of all this stuff that's been going on with COVID. But yeah, so we'll all share the learning, because it doesn't make any sense. We're all got the same overarching priorities. We've all got the same kind of agenda to work to, so let's share, you know, what we've done, what we've learned. And I've been in contact with the pilot sites, so Dorset I've been in contact with, and the Wirral, because they're ahead of us. You know, they're 2 years ahead of us, and they have, you know, learned some lessons. They've had appointed leads in place for the past 2 years as part of the pilot site. So I've been in contact and, you know, said, tell me what you know, and it's just worked really well. So.
Yeah, okay, and that's really interesting, looking at those parts of the world as well, because, you know, a lot of our audience will be familiar with, you know, reducing unwarranted variation and different approaches that the NHS takes to that. In terms of the medicines piece, and that sort of looking to other areas, do you think there's a lot of transferable stuff when you're looking at, you know, you versus the Wirral, or versus, you know, wherever it might be, parts of London, which are very different geographies? Do you still think there's common themes there and things that you'd look to for that from them?
Yes, definitely. I mean, there's always going to be slight nuances based on the geography. So, for example, like Dorset is a kind of I've forgotten the word, the names, they're all in the same place, everything's on the same footprint. The words escape me, it begins with C.
Coterminous.
Thank you. So they're all so they're slightly different footprint from us, a slightly different setup, but the overarching themes, as I've just said, are very similar. You know, and then you've got North East and Cumbria, vast geography. You know, that's a challenge in itself, that geography, but we'll still learn lessons with them and from them and share with them. the same for London. So that you'll have to tweak it to your local geography, but I don't think there's going to be anything that's medicine safety is medicine safety wherever it's done in the country. Unwarranted variation is unwarranted variation if it's unwarranted for you in your local area. So things don't change, and that's we were talking on a call, share this, we were like, we're going to have a North Yorkshire and York subsystem if we aim for that area prescribing committee footprint. And then we were talking on the call, well, why not Humber, Coast and Vale? Well, then it's like, well, why not regional? Well, why not national? The things that stop it from going that big is the people around the table, and it gets too vast, then you kind of lose that decision making.
Okay.
But we're working to the same principles.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's really interesting, because I know I've had a few conversations recently about people concerned about returns to sort of postcode lotteries, and that if every system is working completely independently, and you might have Humber, Coast and Vale thinks at the opposite end of the scale to so somewhere in London, northeast London or something like that, and that you might go back to those days. Do you think there's any danger of that?
No. She says very confidently. The reason I say no so confidently is because even now, we are a York and Scarborough Medicines Commissioning Committee now. Even now, we look to all our neighbours to see where they're at, what they've done, and are we in line, are we anti-kilter? So we look at all other formularies when we make our decisions. The way we make our decisions is on the public facing section of the website. The paperwork that we ask to be completed, to be submitted to the area prescribing committee. That part of that is what's been done elsewhere. So we do that, and I know that all the others do that too. So they're looking around their area and finding out what's being done. And if you kind of take that as a rule, then we're all going to be looking at each other up and down the country. So I think if there is what I call postcode variation, that is because it's been developed for a local flavour for the need for that population, which is what PCNs are about. It allows that variation that's needed, so that isn't unwarranted variation, it's a variation that's needed based on the demographics.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to ask a couple of questions, probably in the wrong order. So thinking about that and sort of how you're looking at things, how do you imagine evaluating success of an IPMO set up across a whole system?
So I think I've said this to you before, data is king, data is queen, depending on what data is. Data is really invaluable, and it's about it's not just data alone, it's triangulating all that success. So data is a key factor, and I say that because we are very rich with data for primary care, always have been for prescribing for primary care. So that tells us a lot about what we're prescribing, what we're spending, items, all of that, and we can kind of benchmark ourselves against others, or ask those questions about, okay, we're higher on this, why are we higher, is that warranted, is it not warranted? So that's prescribing data. That just tells us about spend. We're starting to see that come through for the hospital sites, which is really fantastic, and I've forgotten the person who's leading on that, but that's quite fresh, and that's quite really useful to see the hospital sites kind of data in the same way that we get the primary care data. And then it's about triangulating that with the other data, what I'd call more the soft intelligence data, or the what did we prevent. So in pharmacy, we're quite keen on something called Rio interventions. So that's, did that intervention prevent someone going into hospital? Did it prevent harm? Or what was the likelihood of that? So that's something we're not as familiar with measuring like standardly, but for, let's say, if you've heard about the Medicines Optimisation in Care Homes programme, that started 2 years ago, and I was the name lead for that. that was Humber Coast and Vale level, and it had to be. So medicines optimisation care homes been carried out for 2 years, and to me, you can measure it in several ways. You can measure, what drugs were stopped, and you could get some savings from what stopped. That isn't really the point of it. The point is more about how many medicine reviews happened, how many occurred that wouldn't have occurred because they didn't have that pharmacist in place. And then a key bit is the outcome of that review. Did it prevent someone from going into hospital or, suffering something that they didn't need to suffer because they had that medication review? So we need to pull all of that as kind of a benchmark for us, and how we're doing. So there will be, if we like the medicines optimization in care homes, there's going to be a report when that finishes about how well that went, what did it achieve, how much did we spend on it, etc., etc. And we'll start to do that, and I feel we'll have to start to do that with all our projects if we're going to do them Humber Coast and Vale. So what was the aim? Get some KPIs, and I'm just keen on those quality markers being a real key player for this, as opposed to how much money did you save. And we will save money, and that is important to measure, but in addition to the other stuff, and then triangulate that against the differences it makes to people. And we've done that with the optimization in care homes. The feedback we've had from patients about that service, that's the stuff that puts a big smile on your face and thinks you're doing a good job. So yeah,
absolutely. That's why you go to work in the morning, isn't it? And just picking up on that, so last time we spoke, a couple of the priorities that you sort of mentioned were that bit around, well, there's workforce, which we'll come back to in a minute, I suppose. The other bit was around kind of changing some of the conversations around medicines. And just picking up on what you were saying just there, do you think there's an opportunity now to really change the perception of the value of medicines and really how people think about medicines as a component of care?
I really, really hope so. So I'm just going to put this out on a recording. So the biggest NHS spend is workforce, and then the second biggest spend, I believe, is medicines. So medicine's pretty important to the NHS, and then your pharmacy workforce is the third largest professional workforce in the NHS. So I'm absolute champion that pharmacies are the best placed people to handle all of this to do with medicines, and I really want to open those conversations about this isn't just about money, and this isn't just about quick savings. We can do so much more, and talking about the medicine safety, the quality side, just improving that whole experience and measuring that. Yeah, I'm pretty passionate about that, and I want to get that over. And I think if I bring that passion and I've got that kind of mandate as the named interim lead, I can have those conversations. So, for example, Humber Coast and Vale have asked me to speak to their clinical. I'm part of a clinical professional group. Again, that's happened because I'm the interim lead, and they've said, can you come and talk to us about the role and how you see this happening? So that's my audience. To get this over, when that happens, hopefully in the new year, I'll get over about this is the breadth and depth of what we do. And I think I said to you last time we spoke that I've written a 40-page document about what we do as pharmacy, and it's quip is a couple of pages in there. The rest is it's quite a lot.
Yeah, so thinking about the other members of that clinical leadership group, if they read your paper, how much of that do you think they would recognise from your sort of historic conversations with
I think they'd recognise all of it, but I think they probably just hadn't appreciated that it all what sits with us directly. So I think they would recognise it all, but I think it would be like a quite illuminating, well, hopefully, of actually that all sits with us and why that sits with us. So and there will be new things in there that they may not have known about or unaware, and that paper actually is just from a medicines management point of view. So a CCG perspective, you know, if I add in what the acute chiefs do, what the LPC do, what the PCNs do, you know, that's going to be 100 plus, I think, that document. You know, there's a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I'm just thinking again about this value of medicines message and trying to sort of articulate that across a system. How might you actually, obviously you've got your leadership groups that you speak with, but in terms of trying to communicate with your 96 PCNs around, let's use medicines in different ways or in better ways, or however you want to characterize it, what kind of mechanisms might you use for communicating that?
So if we take the PCNs, for example, so I can speak for the Vale of York, in that we have a GP practice of primary care pharmacist forum, where we speak to them. It used to be face-to-face in those wonderful days. We'd all get around a room, and now we do it virtually. And it's a like, let's get together, let's all meet each other, because you're all frantically beavering away in your practices, working really hard, kind of heads down. Let's share what we know, let's share top tips. We'll do a bit of education session, and we'll run through, you know, any new updates. So we've got that point of contact, and I know that happens in North Yorkshire too, and I'm pretty sure it'll happen in the Humber sites as well. So what I would like to move to is, how can we then get a key contact from each, at the moment we're CCGs, each contact that feeds into the leadership group, so we don't drop anything, we don't miss anything, and we have a cascade system. So I'll be, you know, I'm seeking to, they don't know this yet, I'm seeking to look to you know, kind of recruit some named PCN leads that can cascade messages from the leadership team down to the PCNs. And the best bit is, the real beauty is that our people on the ground, the PCN pharmacists, the GP practice pharmacists, the community pharmacists, the people who work in the hospitals, they are the people will know how to improve things on a practical level, and they will have the ideas to say, well, if we did this, this would make a difference to day-to-day life, and this would make a difference to the value that we get out of medicines. You know, we see waste through this, and we see, you know, inappropriate prescribing through this. So they will feed in those ideas through those forums, cascade that back up, come up with a plan, cascade back down. And I think that will make a massive difference, because it is the people doing the do that help us. And we, you know, why fix it once for one site? If it's happening in one site, it's probably happening more than one site. So like now with the COVID vaccination stuff, if I get a good idea, then I'm just pinging it out and sharing it, you know, across the system, because there's no point somebody sat there trying to fix a problem on their own when we can share that learning.
Yeah, fantastic. And again, you know, you've articulated it really well there, and you articulated at the beginning that this is really about that dispersed leadership. It's not about an ICS agenda and saying to everyone, do this, do that. It's about, okay, we've got resource, we've got forums to facilitate change. Everyone come with your ideas, and we'll work collectively to improve them. Is that a fair way to summarise it?
Yeah, it is, and I would like to elaborate on that dispersed leadership model. So that's, thanks for kind of raising that. So the idea is that go back to, I'm the name lead, but then we have a dispersed leadership model. So we're not there yet because of COVID. Sorry, it just feels like it's just all I ever say. But
if in doubt,
yeah, if in doubt, blame COVID. We just before this all kind of went crazy again, we were looking for named leads for each area. So someone to take the lead for workforce, which actually was going to be me by the fact that I'd been doing it for the past 2 years. Someone to take the lead for medicine safety, someone to take the lead for a big agenda is digital. So pharmacy and digital is huge, and you know, someone to take the lead for it. By taking the lead, and this is what I said to the group, you are not signing your name in blood that you will do everything and anything regarding, you know, digital or you know, workforce. You're just being the point of contact again for that, and then you get up like set up a subgroup or a working group, whatever you want to call it, to move those issues forward. And there's a whole collective of people under that. So it's, you know, that one name lead can't do all of this. They can't do it across Humber, Coast and Vale because the geography is so vast. They can't do it because they've got their day job to do. So just to reiterate that we're all doing this on top of our day jobs. So they're a chief pharmacist of a hospital and they're the named lead for, you know, whatever. Biosimilars, for example, in hospital would be appropriate. So they'll have a group supporting them and they're just moving things forward and then feeding it back to the ICS leadership group, and then we feed it back. And I should, this is a Humber, Coast and Vale specific setup at the time. We feed into the elective care group. So we would feed our progress, results, you know, into the elective care group. So that we've, you know, again, it's about going up and down that kind of chain. Yeah. That dispersed leadership model is really important because no one person can do all of this for Humber, Coast and Vale.
Yeah, I think last time we spoke, you sort of said that you need to say to colleagues that we are the system won't do it because we are the system, that sort of thing. And there's this strange perception.
Thanks for. Yeah, so thank you for raising my. I didn't say this, someone else said this, but I loved it in that, you know, sometimes we sit in meetings and people are like, oh, well, you know, the system can do that. And it's about, yeah, exactly what you've just said. You know, we are the system. There's no magic people. There's no Christmas elves beavering away going to do this for us. So we have to do it and we have to put our hands up and say, you know, we want this. And I see it. You know, I want us to drive it. You know, we're the experts, and so I'd rather we drive it as a leadership group than have someone come in and tell us what they think we should do. We know our system best. So yeah, I do like that. I think it's really important to recognise that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, just following on the workforce, but I was just wondering if there's anything else that you wanted to expand on sort of your priorities around, you know, the future of the workforce.
Yeah, so I think you said to me last time we chatted about, you know, what would be my one priority if I could pick anything, and I've threw you a curveball and said workforce. I think that's, you know, really key for us. So pharmacy workforce is, you know, it's a distinct workforce, pharmacists or pharmacy technicians. And what we have seen over the past few years in where I work, so Vale of York, I can't speak for the whole of Humber, Coast and Vale, but I believe this to be true, is that people are just moving around the system. So they, you know, work for a hospital and then they get a job with a PCN, and then they may move from a PCN to a CCG, or they move back to the hospital, or they work in community pharmacy and they move to a PCN or a hospital. So it's the same people. We don't have a higher education university in the area that that churns out pharmacists. So we have to really protect that workforce. It's quite key. So we feel that if we work together on workforce and share workforce, you know, we can maximise, you know, the workforce that we've got. We want to make it an attractive place for people to come because they want to work in Humber, Coast and Vale. So I think that's really key, and I think that is probably something that, you know, in my head will be done on a subsystem level about sharing workforce. So I think the Wirral, they set up work passports, so you can easily go from one site to another, and there's a lot to do there, but I really like that idea. And I think sharing that workforce across organisations, taking away those organisational barriers, again, you're going to get really true system working. So for the MOC schemes, the medicines optimisation and care homes, we had people who worked in the trust a few days a week, and then they'd go into PCNs and do the medicines optimisation stuff. So they were seeing the problems from both sides of the coin, so secondary care, primary care, and that, you know, that's invaluable to helping us resolve the problems. So yeah, workforce is really important, and, you know, just again about getting that, bringing people in and bringing them with us. You know, there's no point in a ICS leadership group sat in an imaginary ivory tower, not that we are, but, you know, coming up with a load of plans if we don't get the people on the ground involved, the people who are delivering this day to day.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you say, it felt like a bit of a curveball when you said workforce would be your #1 priority, but actually listening to you talking about it, getting that new approach to workforce, or a more responsive, adaptable approach to workforce, supports so many of the other objectives that you'd have a system, doesn't it? So yeah, that's fantastic to hear. You touched briefly on digital as well as being a big enabler for pharmacy. Could you just expand a bit on that?
Yes, so I am no digital guru, so just a bit of a caveat there, but there's a lot of stuff happening with digital. So for example, electronic prescribing, so you know, completely losing paper from a GP to prescribe, sends it electronically to the pharmacy, no bits of paper flying around. We have some sites that still haven't enabled EPS, as it's called, so we need to, you know, work on that and get us all up to speed with electronic prescribing, and then move into electronic repeat dispensing. So where a patient receives what we call like a batch of their prescriptions, they're sent to their community pharmacy, and then the community pharmacy kind of release them to the patient every month when they're needed, so the patient never has to go back to the they don't have to go back to the GP practice, for example, for like 12 months. So that just frees up capacity resource in GP practices, and the patient can just deal with the community pharmacy to get their repeat medicines, and the pharmacies have, you know, got those skills and knowledge to do that. We've seen through COVID times about the introduction of AccuRx, or AccuRx, I think it's called. So community pharmacies have been utilising that across Humber Coast and Vale to do face-to-face consultations on a virtual basis with patients, which is fantastic. You've got all the hospital sites, move into electronic prescribing within the hospitals, and that wave, and that's a national like rollout. And then the next step we want to see, and again it's just maybe ambitious, and we're like working it through now, is, you know, let's do away with TTOs and treatment advice notes, where you go to see a consultant in secondary care and they say you need drug X, and then they write to your GP, and the GP, you know, there's a time delay, and then the GP has to prescribe it. We would like to see that the consultant can just prescribe it there and then electronically, and that goes into the patient's notes. It's just a slicker system for the patient, and it's a safer system for the patient, because there's just one record. So that's ambitious, but that's something that we want to work on. And there'll be so much of the digital stuff that I've just left out that people will be screaming at me going, why didn't you say about this? But, you know, there's lots, you know, digital in my mind makes things safer, and can make things safer. So any opportunity, and digital is I think it will be a national agenda, but it's also I should stress, for Humber Coast and Vale, we have clear overarching things for the whole of Humber Coast and Vale, not specific to medicines, and digital is one of them. You know, mental health is another, cancer is another. So we are feeding into those strategies, as you know, and digital is one that's on the agenda for all of us.
Yeah, and that's a really interesting point there as well, because we've talked a lot about integrating pharmacy almost in a horizontal integration way of all the different parts of pharmacy coming together. Actually, as you say, in the future of integrated care, it's everyone involved in health and social care, isn't it? So how do you integrate pharmacy with care homes, with hospitals, with, you know, voluntary sector, you know, potentially down the line, and that, you know, presents all sorts of challenges. And I guess digital is a huge enabler, because it's kind of something that people have mutual access to. Is that part of the driver behind it?
Yeah, definitely. And it's, you know, just look at us now. You know, that was another thing. So Humber Coast and Vale, our pharmacy leadership group, we used to meet we would alternate it between Hull and York. So, you know, I'm based in York, so then I would drive over to Hull, you know, and drive back. So that's 2 hours of my life wasted. We can just do it all virtually. So loving the digital. We can do this now because of the digital. And then the area prescribing committees, you know, we've met digitally since March. And again, it's just fantastic that we, you know, we don't need to all come together in a room and talking about making it expanding it, so North Yorkshire and York, that was a challenge because you're asking people to drive from York, you know, to Harrogate, for example, or Harrogate to York, and these are busy people that, you know, we don't really want to waste 2 hours of their life in the car, and we don't have to do that now because of digital side. And that what you've just said reminded me, there's integrating pharmacy and medicines optimization within pharmacy. So, you know, acute trust to PCN to CCG to mental health, and community pharmacy, all the specialists in between. What you've just said is quite right, is this is about integrating pharmacy into all those other places that you just mentioned. And I think digital is a huge enabler. And, you know, I don't know the ins and outs of how that will happen, but I know that it's on the table. We have a digital strategy for Humber, Coast and Vale, and I want us to be part of that strategy in pharmacy to have a, like, you know, some very clear lines in there about how we will use digital to enable us to work better together.
Yeah, absolutely. A very exciting place to be, no doubt. I know you've got to leave us a few minutes early to get off to another COVID site. So there's a couple more questions that that I'd like to finish off with. One was a fairly specific one that I know is going to be interesting for our audience, is around, and we touched on it briefly earlier, but the move potentially of specialised commissioning of high-cost drugs from a national level down to ICS level. Have you had any visibility yet on how that might work, what additional delegation you might get, etc.?
I'm going to say no, because I don't know. Again, I can only speculate. I don't think like that specialist side will change. You know, I think it will be my understanding. I may get told off or corrected for not understanding this correctly, but you know, we're CCGs now. When that specialist function comes to us as CCGs, my understanding is from April 2022, we're looking at, you know, effectively one large Humber, Coast and Vale CCG, but it won't be called a CCG. And I think or feel, whatever language you want to use, is that specialist it'll be the same, but it will come to us as a Humber, Coast and Vale footprint as opposed to a Vale of York footprint. But I don't know the answer to that, and I haven't seen anything. So just to kind of stress that, you know, this came out on the 17th of September when things around COVID were, you know, they weren't quiet, but they were quieter. And then ever since, you know, the national team, the regional team, anyone involved really in pharmacy has been kind of diverted to step up to do the COVID vaccination stuff, and quite rightly so. And so, you know, we've got a bit of a delay on all that information, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think that's, you know, a lot of the conversations we're having at the moment. There's always that caveat that we don't know quite yet, which I suppose from your perspective makes going into April trying to do this job incredibly difficult without knowing kind of the parameters that you're working within. What things at the moment do you have clarity on, I suppose?
I guess I'm not anxious. I don't have clarity because, you know, I don't have any time to do it anyway. You know, it's just purely COVID vaccination. You know, so I'm not too concerned, and I know that when things calm down, then the clarity will come. And I think we're already, as I've said, we've been doing this for 2 to 3 years. So I believe, you know, when the time comes, we need to kind of submit an overarching executive summary about, you know, specific to Humber, Coast and Vale, about we want this leadership to look like. I believe that we need to seek to appoint an official lead pharmacist or chief pharmacist, I'm not sure what their title will be, for each ICS, so Humber, Coast and Vale. That was planned for April 2021 to do that. Don't know if that's been pushed back. And then we have to establish what are our priorities, and that will be a case of doing a bit of scoping of, you know, what have we already done, what do we think we can push further, what isn't a priority for us. So I'll give you an example. So they give us like a list, which I'm afraid I can't share with you, but the list, you know, there's nothing, you know, blow your mind in there. It's medicines optimization, it's medicine safety, it's biosimilars, it's digital, it's mental health. but one of the lines in there is genomics. I'm not in a place right now to say that we're going to have a strategy to do genomic medicine soon, but we will, you know, in future. But that would be one of the things we'll probably kind of park for now as a Humber Coast and Vale. Other areas may go sooner with that, but we you know, probably park that and go, well, no, we could do this, this and this, and we could do that now, or we've already done it and we could build on it. So we've got to submit a rough plan, and as I said, the deadlines for that were November, but they've all been pushed back, and we haven't had another date of when we have to do that. And we have been told that, you know, the leadership, the IPMO is COVID vaccination, and that makes perfect sense, and it's perfectly legitimate. But that's the response.
Fantastic, thank you very much. Just one final question. What role do you think the pharmaceutical industry could play in supporting the future medicines landscape?
Okay, thank you. So I said to you on a call, and I'm very happy to repeat this and be honest, I think we need to establish that. I don't know the answer, but what I do know is that it needs to be really fair and open and transparent, and that is key, because we need to avoid any risk of conflict of interest, and that is the problem that we all face. So people get fearful, you know, and this isn't, I'm not being offensive to pharma colleagues, but we don't know, if we don't know what's been discussed, we get a little bit anxious about what may have been discussed. So I think pharma could play a really key role in those relationships, because they've probably got fantastic knowledge about, you know, how we could do things. They've got the data, they've got a different skill set actually that they could bring to the table, but it needs to be done in a really clear, open, transparent way, in a managed way, so that we have allowed all our partners to, you know, access the system, let's call it, you know, fairly. So let's just take DOACs for example. You know, if we talk to one manufacturer about the way things could be done, we've got to talk to the 3 other manufacturers about how things could be done, and allow that, you know, to be, I'll just keep repeating the word, open and transparent. So, you know, pharma will know, you know, what they can offer us. You know, they'll be able to say and spell out what they can offer us, and I think we are open to hear that. We just need to kind of set up those governance processes. So I'd seek advice, and get the system to seek advice about how we could do that. But you know, I think I said to you, at the moment it's tricky because our heads aren't in the right space because of COVID, and if I get an email sent to me, kind of, you know, it's easier for me to politely decline, and I'll re-quote that as I said to you, because if I speak to one or engage with one person, I may have to make sure I then engage with everybody to make it fair. And I'm just going to put a kind of caveat in here about I'm the chair of the Medicines Commissioning Committee for Scarborough and York. And as that role, I make it absolutely clear that I do not want to see anything about rebates. So never ever send me anything about rebates, because I don't want that to be clouded in my decision making. I make decisions, or no, we make decisions based on, you know, is it the right drug for the right patient at the right time, not on a discount. So just to put that in there with a slightly different hat on. But yeah, so I mean, I think that needs further kind of working through, and we're open to that, or I'm open to that, to do that working through about how we can build those relationships. And I think other ICSs will be in similar positions.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you very much, Laura. I think we've just nearly hit 1 o'clock, and I know you've got to run out the door. So thank you very much again. Yeah, very chaotic time for you, so we really appreciate that today.
Oh, no.
We're obviously all still learning about everything that's going on. So for you, our audience, if there's anything that you want to get more clarity on, feel free to get in touch with us. via NHS Insights at mtechaccess.co.uk. Follow us on our LinkedIn page, NHS Whispers, as well, and we'll be posting stuff on there as we know it. We're back on January the 29th with Brent Kilmurray, who's the Chief Executive of TEAS, and we're Vale's NHS Trust, together beyond mental health in the new NHS, particularly in light of everything going on with COVID. So in the meantime, Merry Christmas, everybody. See you in the new year. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Tom.
Thanks, Laura. Bye-bye.
Merry Christmas.